Welcome back to the Book Nook podcast.
Yeah.
Today, we're diving into Melania Trump's new memoir.
Okay.
It's simply titled Melania.
Oh, right.
And, we've got excerpts from the book itself.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this really interesting critique from New York Magazine.
Okay.
And even some reactions from YouTube and Goodreads.
Wow.
So this isn't just a, typical book report kind of thing.
Right.
We really want to dig into what this tells us about Melania.
Interesting.
Because she's such a private figure, right?
Yeah, she is.
Even after reading her own words in this book,
Oh, really?
it's like you're still left wondering, what is she thinking?
Oh, that's so interesting.
And a lot of the sources paint her as this enigma.
Mm-hmm.
So is this intentional, like a carefully cultivated mystique, or is there something else entirely going on?
Yeah, the New York Magazine article really digs into this.
Okay.
And points out some pretty fascinating contradictions.
Pretty safe.
Like, for example, she describes the book as deeply personal, but to a lot of people, it reads as very polished, almost generic.
Really?
Like a very well-written college application essay.
Interesting.
And she says she wants to set the record straight, clarify the facts, but then kind of avoids a lot of the more controversial stuff.
So what do you make of that?
Well, it makes you wonder about the intent behind the whole thing.
Okay.
Is this a genuine attempt at self-reflection, or is it more about shaping her public image?
Right. And especially with the timing of the book.
Yeah,
It comes out right as her husband is running for president again.
that's true.
So it definitely adds a layer to the whole enigma thing.
Exactly.
Now, there's also this whole question of authorship,
Oh, really?
because a lot of sources doubt that she actually wrote the book herself.
Interesting. What makes them say that?
Well, they point to things like the writing style being kind of bland, the heavy use of cliches.
Right.
So do you think a ghostwriter could have captured her voice any better?
It's hard to say, because even with professional help, could anyone really capture
Right.
the essence of such a private and guarded person?
Okay, so maybe this detached, almost impersonal tone.
Yeah.
Maybe that is her way of communicating.
Yeah,
It's consistent with how she's acted over the years.
it really is.
But what about these attempts to portray herself as a businesswoman?
Oh, that's interesting.
It's almost like the descriptions of her failed jewelry line
Mm-hmm.
and that skincare line almost read like they belong in a satire.
Yeah, it's weird why it include these obvious flops, right?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive to what she's trying to do with the book.
So what do you think is going on there?
Well, one interpretation is that she's trying to humanize herself,
Okay.
like show that she's not immune to setbacks and failures.
Okay.
Maybe trying to connect with readers on a level of like,
Right.
hey, I've made mistakes too, but I always bounce back.
I see what you mean. So it's like she's trying to create this image of resilience, but it maybe comes across as a bit tone deaf.
Yeah, possibly.
But then how do we reconcile that with how she portrays Donald Trump?
Right.
Because on the one hand, she tries to distance herself from some of his stances.
Like which ones?
Well, she even claims to support abortion rights,
Here.
which is a big departure from his position.
That's a huge contradiction.
So is she genuinely expressing her own beliefs there?
Yeah.
Or is that a calculated move to appeal to a wider audience?
It's hard to know for sure.
Especially since she dedicates a good chunk of the book to praising him.
Yeah, and defending his actions.
So is this genuine affection?
Right.
Is it strategy?
Yeah.
Or is it maybe a mix of both?
I think it's probably a mix.
It really adds to the mystery surrounding her.
It does.
Now, before we dive into some more specific anecdotes and controversies,
Okay.
I just want to remind our listeners, if you're enjoying this deep dive,
Yes.
don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast
Absolutely.
and leave us a review.
That would be great.
It really helps other people find the show.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so back to Melania.
All right.
She also dips her toes into some pretty hot button issues.
Like what?
Things like Black Lives Matter
Oh, wow.
and the January 6th insurrection.
Oh, okay.
But her takes often feel very shallow and kind of out of touch.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's in these sections where that question of authenticity comes up again.
It makes sense.
Is she trying to engage with these really complex issues in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
Or is it more about just presenting a certain image?
That's a good question, especially given how politically charged those topics are.
Right, because these are issues where her husband has taken very strong stances.
Very strong and very divisive stances.
Yeah, so it's hard to read her words without thinking about that bigger context.
Definitely.
But then, amidst all the serious stuff, you get these bizarre, almost comical details.
Oh, really? Like what?
Like her apparent obsession with limousines.
Limousines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so strange. I know. And then there's this awkward anecdote about meeting Brigitte Macron.
What happened?
I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
weird. And then this weird story about distributing Be Best tote bags in Africa.
Be best tote bags in Africa.
Yeah. It's just these details, while they seem kind of trivial,
Mm-hmm.
they offer a really fascinating glimpse into her world
That's true.
and how she approaches public life.
Yeah, they add this layer of absurdity
Yeah.
that makes you question her intentions.
Right. Is she trying to present a certain image,
Yeah.
or these genuine attempts at connecting with people?
Yeah, even if they are a bit tone deaf.
Yeah, it's like she's trying to build this image of sophistication and grace,
Uh-huh.
but then these quirky details keep popping up and they kind of undermine the whole thing.
And that's what makes the book so captivating.
Right.
It's this carefully constructed narrative.
Yeah.
But it reveals more through its cracks and inconsistencies
Right.
than it does through its intended message.
Exactly. And we are going to unpack those cracks and inconsistencies even further in part 2. But before we do that,
Yeah.
I want to ask you,
Yeah.
what stands out to you so far?
Okay.
What are your initial impressions of this memoir?
Mm.
Hold that thought, and we'll be back in a flash to dig even deeper.
All right, sounds good. So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the events and controversies in the book, I want to go back to this idea of contradictions.
Okay.
Because it really feels like the defining theme.
Right.
Not just within the book itself, but also in how people are reacting to it.
It's true. The whole thing feels like this balancing act.
Yeah.
Between careful image management
Uh-huh.
and these little moments where a different Melania peeks through. It's like she's trying to control the narrative.
Yeah.
But then can't help but reveal certain vulnerabilities or
Okay.
inconsistencies.
And those inconsistencies, I think, are super revealing.
Okay.
Like, take, for instance, the "I really don't care, do you" jacket incident.
Oh, yeah.
Something that's baffled people for years.
Right.
And the book doesn't really explain it.
So for those who need a refresher,
Yeah.
she wore this jacket while visiting a children's detention center.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Not exactly the best look.
No, not at all.
And in the book, she claims it was a message to the press.
Really?
Yeah, like she was showing them that she wouldn't be bullied
Mm-hmm.
by their negative coverage.
But does that even make sense?
I mean, it's hard to reconcile that explanation
Yeah.
with the context.
Totally. It just comes across as tone deaf,
Mm-hmm.
no matter who she was supposedly targeting.
Right, and it highlights this disconnect
Yeah.
between her actions and her words.
Yeah.
She talks about compassion and empathy,
Right.
but then makes choices that contradict those values.
It's like she's operating on two different levels.
Mm-hmm.
You have the carefully curated public persona,
Yeah,
and then these impulsive actions
Right.
that reveal a totally different side.
and the book never bridges that gap.
Right.
So you're left wondering which Melania is the real one.
It's true.
And this pattern pops up in other areas, too.
Like where?
Her discussion of the Black Lives Matter movement, for example.
Okay.
She dedicates a whole section to it.
Yeah, I remember that.
But a lot of critics and reviewers
Yeah.
found it very superficial.
What do you mean?
Like, she wasn't really grappling with the systemic issues
Uh-huh.
of racism and police brutality.
Right.
Instead, she focused more on condemning the violence
Interesting.
and property damage from some of the protests.
So it's a perspective that aligns more with her husband
Yes.
than with the actual message of the movement.
Exactly. And again, it raises that question of authenticity.
Yeah. Is she really expressing her own beliefs?
Right.
Or is this just a calculated move
Right.
to fit a specific political agenda?
It's so frustrating because you want to understand her perspective,
Totally.
but the book often feels more like a presentation
Yeah.
than a genuine exploration of her thoughts.
It makes you wonder what she's hoping to achieve.
Right? Is it about setting the record straight, rehabbing her image,
Uh-huh.
or just giving us a glimpse into her world?
Right.
Maybe it's a little bit of all of those things.
Yeah. Probably.
I mean, it's definitely a calculated move, especially with the timing.
Yeah.
But there are these moments where a different Melania shines through.
Okay.
Like her focus on the Be Best initiative.
Oh, right.
She spends a lot of time talking about it.
Uh-huh.
And you can tell she really cares about these issues.
Which issues specifically?
Cyberbullying, promoting children's well-being.
Okay.
But some people might see it as a PR move.
Yeah.
But you can sense the passion in her writing.
Okay, so maybe she's just not good at conveying it authentically.
That could be it.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the challenge of being Melania Trump.
I mean, every word, every action is scrutinized through the lens of her husband's presidency and all the controversy around it.
So it makes it hard to separate the persona from the person.
That's true.
And that's what keeps us coming back to this book.
It is
Even with all the flaws and contradictions.
Trying to figure her out.
We're trying to unravel the mystery.
Yeah.
But just when you think you're getting close.
Right.
She throws a curveball.
Like what?
Like her fascination with world leaders.
Oh, yeah.
She name drops all these prominent figures and talks about how much she admired them.
Okay.
But it feels more like a list of encounters than a real reflection on global politics.
It's another example of that tension between the curated image and the reality that peeks through.
Right. She wants to seem worldly and sophisticated.
Yeah.
But the details she shares don't support that.
It's like those Instagram influencers.
Totally.
Posing in front of private jets.
Right.
Trying to project an image of wealth.
But the reality might be totally different.
Yeah, it's all about crafting a narrative, even if it doesn't align with the actual experience.
And Melania kind of accidentally reveals that.
Yes.
By showing those seams and inconsistencies. And we're going to delve even further into those inconsistencies.
Okay.
In part 3. But before we do that,
yeah,
I just want to remind our listeners that if you're enjoying this deep dive,
yes,
be sure to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast.
Absolutely.
Leave us a review.
It really helps other people find the show.
And join these fascinating conversations.
Yes, it does.
I think it's safe to say that this book has left us with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the point, right?
Maybe.
It's definitely gotten people talking.
Oh, for sure.
Which is a success in itself.
Yeah, totally.
In a world that's so full of content, sometimes just getting people to engage is the biggest win you can hope for.
And Melania has definitely done that.
It's become a cultural touchstone almost.
Yeah, like a Rorschach test. People are projecting their own feelings onto it.
Right.
About Trump, about the First Lady, about Melania herself.
Yeah, and that leads to a very divided response. Like that New York Magazine article we talked about was very critical.
Yeah, pointing out all the flaws.
But then you have those Goodreads reviews.
Right.
Where people were actually moved by it.
Really?
Yeah, some found her relatable, even inspiring.
Huh. That's so interesting.
It's amazing how one book can do that.
It is.
It really shows the power of narrative and how we all interpret things differently.
Yeah, through our own lens.
And it just makes it even harder to understand Melania.
It does.
She's always kept her thoughts and feelings private.
Right.
So this memoir offers a glimpse.
Yeah.
But it's a very controlled glimpse.
Like we're only seeing what she wants us to see.
Exactly. It's like she's giving us a tour of her life. But she's also controlling the lighting, the angles, everything.
Carefully crafting the image.
And that's where I think the book succeeds.
Okay.
Even if it's not like a literary masterpiece.
Right.
It gets people thinking, debating, arguing.
It starts conversations.
And that's not easy to do these days.
No, it's not.
It's generated so much buzz.
More than most memoirs.
And maybe that was the whole point.
Yeah, to remind everyone that she's still relevant.
That she's a force to be reckoned with.
On her own terms.
Yeah, and whether you find her words insightful or revealing or just plain confusing.
They've definitely made an impact.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with this thought.
Okay.
This book doesn't really tell us who Melania Trump is.
Right.
But it does give us a glimpse.
Yeah, a fascinating and often contradictory glimpse.
Into the life of a woman who's occupied this really unique role.
One of the most visible yet least understood.
Exactly. And it's a story that's going to continue to be told.
Oh, for sure.
Analyzed, debated.
For years to come.
And this memoir is just one chapter.
It's a small piece of the puzzle.
So thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yeah.
Into the world of Melania.
Thanks for listening.
We hope you learned something.
Yeah, and maybe you'll even check out the book yourself.
And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the Book Nook podcast.
Please do.
And leave us a review.
We love hearing from you.
Thank you for listening to the Book Nook podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Be sure to check the link in the description to get your copy of the book.
That's right.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of books.